All right. Well, good morning. My name is Trina Shanks. I'm the Harold R. Johnson Collegiate Professor. I lead community engagement, and for matters of this, I'm the director of the Center for Equitable Family and Community Wellbeing at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. I guess I should take this off. It's kind of mumbled, huh? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, can you hear me better? Okay, so welcome to the U of M Detroit Center, and thank you all for joining us this morning. And I'm going to start by going over our agenda. There we go. So you've checked in, you're all here, that's good. I'm doing the welcome and introductions. Our keynote speaker is Representative Rashida Tlaib, and she is scheduled to come on right at 9:30. So if she comes early, I will stop and let her say her thing, but we're looking forward to her remarks. She was gonna be here in person, but they might have a vote on infrastructure and Build Better in America, or whatever the 7.5 bill is. So we'd like her to be there to vote. And so she'll be here via live stream. So thank you for being patient with us with those logistics. But then our research team is going to go over all the data we've been working on for the last 10 months, and that you have pieces of it with you in the council district profiles, and then we'll tell you more along the way. And then, okay, but she knows she comes at 9:30, so good. And so after the presentation, we have 4 great panelists. You see their names right here, and they'll come up and give their reactions and recommendations. And then after that, we're going to go to breakout groups to give all of us a chance to talk about the data and talk about potential recommendations. And then after the breakout groups, we'll have lunch served, and then we'll come back together, do quick highlights, and then wrap up. So that's kind of the agenda for today. Okay, so I'm excited about our conversation today. As everyone here is probably aware, affordable housing is a national problem. There's currently no housing market in the United States where a minimum wage job will pay for a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rate. And that's defined by government as not more than 1/3 of gross monthly income. And one would like to think that here in Detroit, where it's possible to find homes at reasonable prices, home ownership would be easier and maybe a viable option even for low to moderate income households. But as many of you probably know, or will soon see when we share the data, that even when you participate in programs that are supposed to help, there's still many challenges and barriers to qualifying for a mortgage and successfully purchasing a home. So when my team was approached with an idea for better understanding the local housing market, we readily agreed. Our Center for Equitable Family and Community Wellbeing really actively seeks opportunities to collaborate on exciting new ideas and possible research projects. So now I will introduce the team that's been working on this for the last 10 months. Okay, so David Palmer, who is a local real estate agent and is part of David Palmer LLC, he actually came to us with this idea. And said, you know, we really want to understand if people go to home ownership training and are really interested in buying a home, what's their success rate? And so we, as you'll hear, went through a lot of process to try to get this data and to try to get something that would be helpful. But I said if we're going to do this, we need a community partner. So with the Employment Equity Learning and Action Collaborative that we're doing with the Kellogg Foundation, I've had a relationship with Hector Hernandez from Southwest Economic Solutions, and when I asked, he said, yeah, we're in, we'll do this. And so we appreciate his being willing to help. And so he brought along his colleague, Alex McCone, who her picture will be up in a second, and that's the team from Southwest Economic Solutions. And then my team at the University of Michigan is Patrick Meehan, who you'll hear from in a second. He's our program manager, and he really did the lion's share of the work in terms of bringing all the data sets together, putting them on a map, and you'll hear from him in just a second. We also have Lucine Jara, who is our social work intern, a field intern, but I mean, she's been an active part of this team. She made these beautiful council district profiles that made them look good, and has been part of us from the beginning. We also have a PhD student, Elizabeth Harris, who started in September and has also been helping research and been part of the team lately. And I really want to say this has been a team effort. We've worked together pretty closely over the last 10 months. We've had half-day, sessions at Southwest Solutions, just trying to work out what do we want to say, what data do we have, what conclusions can we make. So I think you'll be pleased with the information and results once you hear it. And so Representative Talib will be on in a few minutes, but I want to just go over a few logistics. If you haven't figured it out, if you go out the door and past the information desk and to the left, there are bathrooms. The first hallway is the men's bathroom, and the second hallway is the women's bathroom. We will serve lunch. If you went and parked in the parking structure and got a parking ticket, when you get your lunch, we'll validate that so you don't have to pay for parking. And then you should have a number on your name tag, which is the breakout room that you'll be going to after the sessions. So if you have any questions, we also have other members of my team who are here, who weren't necessarily part of the research team but are helping. I saw Dominique Crump, she's over here, Sonia Harb, Fatima Salman, Aisha Ghazi might be here soon. So anyone who's from the University of Michigan can kind of point you in the right direction. And so I'm hoping you guys are ready to talk solutions, to think about ideas, to hopefully have a dynamic interaction. And so is the representative ready? Okay. Well then, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our Representative Rashida Tlaib. She's currently the Congresswoman for Michigan's 13th Congressional District, which includes the city of Detroit and the surrounding communities to the west. She was first elected to this position in 2019. She serves on the House Committee on Financial Services, which oversees HUD, so Housing and Urban Development and all things housing. And she also serves on the House Committee for Oversight and Reform. But as all of you all know, she's committed to the people and the citizens of Detroit and really is a partner in trying to make things better. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Representative Tlaib, and we look forward to your remarks.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to the Detroit Neighborhood Housing Compact and Detroit Future City for having me. And thank you so much to David Palmer, University of Michigan School of Social Work, and the Southwest Economic Solutions folks for all their work that they've been doing to help Detroiters realize the dream of home ownership. You all know, and I'm talking to the choir of folks that understand that so many of our communities in our state have historically been disinvested in and really truly left behind when it comes to our fair share of resources to help our families. Many of the communities truly haven't really recovered from the Great Recession. And we're on the front lines of the impact of the COVID, the pandemic. I know in Michigan, we've seen the effects of that disinvestment firsthand. Wayne County's Black homeownership was once the envy of the nation. We were like 70% Black homeownership, but over the past 20 years, Michigan has lost more Black homeowners than any other state in the country. We've seen too many of our families squeezed out of the middle class because our communities lack safe, affordable housing stock. As the Great Recession devastated our neighborhoods, too many federal dollars went towards demolition and tearing down properties rather than rehabbing and constructing new affordable units. In my congressional district, more than half of the homes are valued at less than $100,000. Yet, according to the Urban Institute, just 23.3% of those homes valued at $100,000 or less were able to be purchased with a mortgage. So again, even though our homes are available less than $100,000, there is no access to mortgages through the traditional banks. How many of first homeowners have $100,000 cash lying around? Do you have $100,000 cash ready right now to purchase a home? Absolutely not. Many of our families are living check by check. The banks don't want to make small dollar loans because they're not profitable enough. We all know that. But if our neighbors are being denied loans for starter homes valued at $70,000 or $80,000, how on earth are they supposed to get a loan for $150,000 or $200,000? So if we want to get banks to lend to our neighbors on small dollar mortgages like this, too many, again, of our neighbors will be shut out from accessing that lending and from accessing home ownership, which we know can get folks out of the cycle of generational poverty. You know, and I know that this isn't right, and the Federal Housing Administration has a responsibility, and their mission is to provide mortgages to credit-worthy borrowers who are underserved. But the FHA hasn't been able to step up and meet the demands of the low-cost, small-dollar mortgage market, and they haven't been stepping in to help our neighbors. This is what happens when policy and investments are being made without taking into our community's interest and really our community's pain and some of the challenges we're facing. And don't let anyone tell you that people in Wayne County, the people in our rooms that we are serving, and there are agencies that come through the door, don't want to own a home. They do. We know that just 20% of the people who attended home buyer counseling and education services in Wayne County were able to purchase a home. So we know that there's all these folks that are going through the process, but at the end are not able to access that home ownership. So this means that we have a huge unmet demand from families looking to purchase their first home. Demand for the construction of new affordable homes, the demand for significantly expanded down payment assistance, and the demand for small dollar mortgages. I want you to know that I'm committed in fighting at the federal level to reform our broken systems, and they are broken, to truly reinvest in our communities that have been left behind and get every dollar we can towards helping our residents achieve the dream of home ownership. I'm proud that I have a bill that has passed the House of Representatives. It's the FHA small dollar mortgages. And again, it passed with overwhelming bipartisan support earlier this year. And the bill, it's called the Improving FHA Support for Small Dollar Mortgages Act of 2021. It requires HUD to report on the barriers of small dollar FHA mortgages and act to remove them. In the Senate, Senators Tester from Montana and Senator Loomis from Wyoming have introduced a bipartisan Senate companion bill. We know that the FHA hasn't been stepping up to the plate, both for districts like mine, but also for rural communities like those in Montana and Wyoming. So we need this kind of, I think, bold and meaningful change in these systems. And I'm optimistic that with such a wide bipartisan support for this legislation, it will be signed into law this Congress with your help. I also wanted to share that several provisions I have been fighting for is in the Build Back Better Act, which I hope to vote for today. By the way, there's two separate bills. You're going to see this member of Congress not voting for one, but voting for the one that I feel like gets us to the pathway of addressing some really broken systems, but also accessing more clean air and clean water for our residents. But the Build Back Better Act would provide housing investment in our communities. You all know, and some of you already know, it creates a community restoration revitalization fund, and it's based off of the bill I introduced to build, rehabilitate, homes, basically home repairs dollars. When I have been talking to a lot of residents, it's also about sustaining home ownership, right? And many of our families are, in dire need for home repair dollars to really fund what I feel like for distressed homeowners is to maintain the equity in their homes by providing assistance for home repairs and the purchase of non-performing mortgages. That's all in that bill. We started off with 7.5 billion, got it to 5 billion, and unfortunately it is now to 3 billion, but I am still willing to continue to work towards getting it fully funded at the level that I feel like will make it equitable. The Build Back Better Act would also provide 10 billion towards providing first generation homeowners with assistance towards down payment cost, closing cost, and other assistance towards reducing the mortgage interest rate. It would also provide 500 million towards housing and counseling agencies, yay to all my folks in the room, to support the really unbelievably important critical work that you all are doing. And again, doing the counseling that's needed for homeownership. We also need to see major investments in constructing new units for our first-time homeowners so they can afford it. The Build Back Better Act does invest 10 billion towards constructing and purchasing and rehabbing affordable homes for purchase, and 15 billion in what they call the preserving and creating affordable rental units. Right now, you all know that's simply not enough money for from the other states and local grants to make up the difference that we need. But with the Build Back Better Act, we have a unique opportunity in Congress to restore and transform our communities with the full, robust investment in housing. By the way, this is the most, I think this is a historic investment in housing in our nation we haven't seen since the 1930s, I believe. And so we got to get the Build Back Better passed out of the Senate. Again, I think the Manchin bill that everyone calls the bipartisan infrastructure bill, they're trying to pass that. And I feel like, that's going to go straight to the president's desk. And the folks that have been pushing the one that I'm not voting for is going to get what they want. And, we got to continue to fight and make sure that Build Back Better doesn't die in the Senate, as the Voting Rights Act seems to be happening, as well as the PRO Act and the $15 Minimum Wage Act, and so many bills that continue to go to the Senate that we pass, seems to not lead to the president's desk. But that's where you all come in. You all are my partners on the ground that give credibility of what we're saying, that we need Build Back Better Act to move forward. Don't let anyone gaslight you to believe that the Manchin bill that they call the bipartisan infrastructure bill that really is roads and more pollution and highways and all those things and bridges. Some of that is very important, those infrastructure dollars, but it can't be done alone without us actually understanding that we need homes and we also need infrastructure for our families, from childcare to trying to really combat poverty in a way that I think is meaningful and can really get people out of the cycle of poverty. So again, I want to thank all the folks at Detroit Future City, Detroit Neighborhood Housing Compact for having me, and more importantly, for all the great work that you all are doing here today. I'm so grateful for your partnership. Again, you know, movement work like yours, and I know some of you don't call it movement work, but the work that you all do in speaking the truth about families and their struggles is critical. You are in rooms that many of our residents will never be in. You are in spaces with universities like the University of Michigan and others that our community will never ever be in because they're working, they're taking care of their families. So it's on you, all of you, to speak that truth about the struggle and asking and demanding that government be about people. And that means the federal government investing in some of the programming that you know can really help all of our communities across the country thrive. So again, thank you so much. And I know that you will always have a fighter and a partner in the United States Congress.
Do we have opportunity to ask her any questions? Is that going to work on the feed? Yeah. Okay. Representative Tlaib, do you have a moment or two to field questions from the audience if there are any? This is David Palmer.
Yeah, sure. Don't worry. A Republican just motioned to adjourn because they don't want us to do anything today. Any of our residents would have been fired if you motioned to adjourn or quit at 8 a.m. But your Congress member already voted no on a motion to adjourn, so I have a little time here.
Thank you.
The reality of what I'm dealing with here in the United States Congress. So. Yeah, they don't want Build Back Better. They seem to want more pollution and poverty and decay.
No shortage of interesting moments.
Yes.
Do we have any questions from the audience while we have the representative on the line? Michelle, are you trying to raise your hand back there? No? Okay. Yep. Trina? Well, just really, yeah.
Representative Tlaib, I know that when we had a conversation with you earlier, you said that even once these bills are passed, which we hope they will be, that it's still going to be a matter of working together to implement them on the ground. And so since we have people who represent banking here, we have people who represent community development organizations here, we have people who represent nonprofits, what are some things, assuming that some or all of these things are passed, that we can really do to work together to implement them in a way that helps people in Detroit?
So, one thing that Secretary Fudge has continued to say, and it's Secretary Fudge has got an amazing lived experience. I mean, she was a mayor, right? And she was a member of the United States Congress, now is running HUD. And, she comes from a community like Cleveland, which I feel like has similar challenges to our city, to the city of Detroit. And, I constantly talk to her about implementation and allowing more flexibility. So the one thing to know is when we pass these large investments and bills, there's a lot of flexibility that allows local communities to have a say in how it gets implemented because they're close to the ground, which means all of you need to be engaging Detroit City Council, the mayor's office, the state, the county, all of the folks that will get the funding that will then come down and pass down to many agencies. In some cases, some cities want to do it themselves. Some will sub-grant it out to the agencies like in the room. You all know that, but that's where you all come into play. I'll give you an example. I very much disagreed in how it was done, but we had, American Rescue Plan, over $800 million or so. I believe it's a lot more that came through the county and came through the city of Detroit. The city of Detroit dollars had to go through city council as per our city charter. And so as it went through city council, I think city council then just handed it over in many ways to the city administration. And now the city administration really has more power in how the American Rescue Plan dollars is distributed. So then Now you have to count on engaging the mayor's office, engaging the administration, and where those dollars go, and how home repair grants are implemented on the ground. What do those processes look like? I say that to you all because, as a former state rep, and when I talked to Secretary Fudge, I told her I feel like I'm doing all these amazing things and funding things like water shutoffs, for instance, and then finding out on the ground, oh, that doesn't cover reconnection fees, and then working with the administration to say, no, it has to count reconnection fees. The whole point of the $1.1 billion was to get people's water back on. And if we don't cover the reconnection fees of $80 or so, then people's water will still be disconnected, right? So I think, Trina, what I'm trying to say to all of you is, as the money comes down from the federal government, it goes down to the local communities, from the county, the state, and the city. And that's where, especially housing dollars, and you know this because historically they pushed and had housing commissions created in communities. They have different departments, from MISHDA to then, Planning Development Department, all these other agencies at the local level that get these dollars. And then it is on them and our local accountability work to allow implementation to be equitable and to be fair, so all communities are touched, not just the same communities over and over again. I hope that makes sense, but that's what I think when I was trying to talk to many of you working on this study and to really trying to dissect why we haven't been able to get everyone through the housing counseling a home, which is a legitimate question. It's to understand that as the federal government puts these dollars in, it's great, we celebrate it. Implementation is key, because the dollar amount can even be smaller but more effective. But if the dollar amount's large and it comes on the ground and it's not effective in actually accessing home ownership, then we failed. And it's on the local communities and local governments to making sure, again, that it's done in a fair, just way, that it's accessible to our residents that need it the most.
We have a couple more minutes. Other questions for the representative? All right, we've got a quiet room this morning, Congresswoman.
That's okay. I do want you all to know we're going to need your help in getting Build Back Better out of the Senate. When we pass these bills today, one I really feel like is not enough, but also has poison pills in there of pipelines and all those really bad stuff for our community. I want you to know that we're going to need you all to really work on helping us get Build Back Better done. We pass this out of the House, it goes to the Senate, it has to pass the Senate, y'all. So if we want to see $150 billion historic investment in housing for the first time in, again, 1930s, we have to get the Build Back Better Act out of the Senate. So as people celebrate today that we got it out of the House, I am not going to celebrate as much as I am when it gets to the president's desk. You all are really on the front lines to helping make that happen. So please help me get Build Back Better done. And let's also make sure the Senate doesn't dilute it down. It used to be $350 billion. They got it down to $150 billion. I want it to stay at that amount or even increase, as you all know, because we really, truly need this. We're not going to be able to address the issues that we see among our children and our families, the human suffering that we see happening, if we can't provide livable, safe homes for our families. So please help us get there by supporting getting it through the Senate. Thank you, David, and thank you, Trina.
Yeah, thank you for joining us this morning, and good luck with getting your colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do votes today. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Oh, there I am on the big screen. Hi. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is David Palmer. While the screen comes back up, I'm going to make sure my clicker works still, and we'll press down. There it is. All right. Yay, technology. Thank you to our tech team for coming in this morning. making these things work is really a fire drill. They got here at 7 to set up all this gear, and hopefully we have a good recording and all that fun stuff today so that we can let this live on the interwebs for a while. My background is kind of bulleted on the screen there. Yes, they are disparate activities, if you will. So I'm an associate broker realtor. I've been licensed in Michigan since, I believe, 2012, 2013, in that range. And since 2013, I've been volunteering to teach the realtors portion of the homebuyer education course. So I've been doing that for a number of years, where all the folks that come into these classes that we've been looking at this HUD data for are at different places on the spectrum of ready to purchase. So in the hour or 90 minutes that I have in front of these typically first-time home buyers, I kind of take them through the nitty-gritty of what it's like to work with a realtor, the fact that you're going to get emotionally attached to a property that you may not get, and talking about the roller coaster of things that occur in the home purchase process. I talk a lot about due diligence. It's buyer beware. So unless you are willing to invest the time and energy in figuring out what it is that you're buying, you may be buying a house that doesn't have things that function inside of it, which is kind of hard when you're in a first-time homebuyer class. If you're looking for down payment assistance to support the acquisition of the property, you probably don't have any money back, because in order to qualify for DPA, you can't have more than $10,000 in the bank in liquid assets. That number may have gone up a little bit recently. Friend Elizabeth from the MSU Extension back there is explaining that that went up. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. So anyway, if you're getting that DPA, you probably don't have a whole lot of cash in the back. So you need to make sure your furnace works, that the sump pump is functioning, that the roof is in good shape, and all these sorts of things. So when you're in this first-time homebuyer class and you're getting fed a fire hose of data, having professionals in the course is really important. And ultimately, I think one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit today is getting more support to homebuyer education agencies, because they operate on a similar model as our friends in the medical community would on Medicaid reimbursement. So they might only be getting 72 or 82 or 90% of the total cost of serving the people that are in their courses. So when you think about the wraparound services and the additional investment these agencies make in helping folks through these programs to become homeowners, that's an often overlooked component of the equation. I need to thank more folks. So Lucine and Lucas really put together a fantastic annotated bibliography. I'm going to be talking about literature review here for a few minutes, and to read through all the reports and create synopsis of what those things were took a lot of time and effort. So I want to acknowledge our colleagues on the research team who really led that charge, and thank them for that. Also want to thank, obviously, Congresswoman Tlaib for taking time out of her schedule. She wanted to be here this morning, but obviously has stuff to do in Washington, so we know how that goes. And really, Trina's team from the University of Michigan for accepting this project, and Hector's team at Southwest Economic Solutions for jumping on as a community member. Because when I was sort of milling around looking for ways to drive this kind of research forward, as a sort of sole proprietor consultant running an LLC who does a lot of workforce development stuff and nonprofit advising, LLCs aren't usually qualified to get grants, at least from these types of sources. So without their participation, investment, and passion, this wouldn't have been possible. So, we are not the first, and we will not be the last. I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of people have been doing research in this space for a long time, and that's really what I think literature reviews are important for, especially living in the city of Detroit. When somebody's proposing a new study be done about something, my first question of the fancy consultant that gets brought in to do stuff is, have you done a research on all of the other reports on a similar topic that have been done in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 50 years? Because there are libraries full of reports on research that have been done in the city of Detroit, throughout the region, and obviously nationally on a lot of these topics. So one of the interesting pieces that we were reminded of as we were coming into this project is the Kresge Foundation invested quite a bit of time and energy and dollars convening on these topics with a report that was published in 2016 that yielded the creation of the Detroit Home Mortgage Program. We know that Detroit Home Mortgage was, I think, successful from a PR standpoint, modestly successful from how many homes did we get closed standpoint, and is now being sunset. When I was referring clients to Detroit Home Mortgage Program, I would get the list of the people at the institutions that were participating, and I would refer my clients to talk to that person. Well, if that person wasn't with the institution anymore and they started calling around inside of the institution, like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. What is this Detroit Home Mortgage that you're talking about? So a lot of the folks that I think were ready to jump into a Detroit Home Mortgage product and take advantage of the opportunities that were there were directed into other streams. And we don't know from the data available whether or not those referrals got closed into other loans. So outcome metrics for the Detroit Home Mortgage Program are mixed, I would say, from my analysis as somebody who does this kinds of research on the regular. But acknowledging that Kresge was in this space and that their report from 2016 that talked about from the Homebuyer Ecosystem Working Group, had 7 key recommendations, which only one of the 7 I think is truly operational at this point. So when we look at the list of recommendations that they wanted to source for professionals and a website for home buyers to go to. Well, there's lots of those websites. There's not necessarily a missing piece of the marketplace, but what there is almost very little connection, I would say, to the professional real estate community. So if you create a concierge type position within the city of Detroit, then you have all kinds of fair housing questions. Are these people that are consulting with folks, steering folks to different neighborhoods or communities, these sorts of things? So really realtors are the best place to put that responsibility because we're regulated by the state and we fall under a number of federal regulations that say, hi human, you would like to buy a house. Tell me where you would like to buy your house. Tell me the attributes you'd like to have in your house. I'm not going to say anything about Osborne versus Corktown versus the North End. That's not my place as an agent. My place is to help them find the properties that they're prioritized. Where the sort of these sort of in-between brokers between lenders and realtors that are giving advice, may not have that same scale of understanding. And 2 covers that concierge position. Near ready into mortgage ready is a real challenge in this marketplace. Near ready are folks, I would argue, that go through this homebuyer education course. And then to mortgage ready is jumping through all the hoops to make sure that you can close on that property. So it's not just getting the mortgage, it's making sure that the appraisal clears. It's making sure that a home insurance policy can be drawn and the location. You'll see some maps later today where we've mapped out the Proposal N stabilized properties from the HRD website over the existing mortgage landscape. And a lot of those Prop N stabilized properties are quite frankly located in neighborhoods where we're going to have a real challenge getting a traditional insurer to insure the home to guarantee a traditional mortgage product. So these are the sort of creative things that we really need to get into the weeds on and look to these federal investments that the Congresswoman was talking about to figure out how to make solutions that actually work in the city of Detroit. So marketing to target neighborhoods, we could argue that this piece is in progress. I think the mayor and his team have done a nice job of doing convening in neighborhoods for a number of the improvements. I lived in Hubbard-Richard for a number of years, which is adjacent to Mexican Town and Corktown. And the process where the Mexican Town business district has been upgraded and parts of the Verner thruway have been upgraded. Those are good investments and they ultimately assist sort of the curb appeal of neighborhoods. But there's still, I think, a lot of work to be done as far as coordinating with the neighbors that actually live in the community. So looking at marketing to target neighborhoods, there's a lot of, I think, chances to lift up neighborhoods through this conversation. And we're presenting information about neighborhoods in clusters today. So like in the Grandmont cluster, you've got all 5 neighborhoods, so we're not breaking down to the sort of minutia that some of us would prefer. But from a data and presentation perspective, that's what we have from the city and from Data-Driven Detroit. Providing specialized support to the realtor community, I think, is really important. The realtor community, when I talk with my colleagues, I take a lot of referrals from realtors in the suburbs who won't come to the city of Detroit for one reason or another. This is at best an awkward conversation for me when I hear this kind of blunt feedback from the community. But I think there's another opportunity here that doesn't get discussed a lot is fair housing laws and secret shoppers. It would be real nice to see at some point in the future that effort really beefed up. And Steve Tomkowiak from the Fair Housing Center will be presenting on our panel this morning, and he has intimate knowledge of how those sorts of programs work. So the one piece that is really in place is the Detroit Housing Compact. So our friends from Detroit Future City are here. Kimberly will be presenting on the panel. And the compact has been a really great, almost clearinghouse for a number of the stakeholders in this room, as well as others that come to the table to talk about housing opportunities and challenges in a real focused way. So again, we're not the first and we're not the last. So if you do some research on the types of reports that are out in the marketplace, you can find a major report on Detroit's housing market coming out at least once annually for almost the last decade. So all of these pieces typically go to the HMDA data that we're going to look at today, as well as another of other pieces. And even our friends in the national media have become embedded in this community in some regards to hopefully move away from the ruin porn that was being looked at during the Great Recession, and now are sort of flexing through equity and diversity conversations. So. And that's all really helpful to have that spotlight. So there's just a ton of information out there. I think of the NCRC, National Community Reinvestment Coalition, that came out with a report last year that outlines what it would take to get 60% African American homeownership again. This city has fallen off a cliff for African American homeownership for reasons that many of you are intimately aware with that we won't go into today, but there's an opportunity on the table with the investments that we're talking about to really increase those numbers and focus on the median income Detroit household, which is where a lot of the information that we're going to be pointing at today is going to go. So our friends at HUD, thank goodness, have been doing a lot of reflection on homebuyer education programs. So they've been putting out reports annually for several years now that look at the outcomes and efficacy of these programs. Because quite frankly, it's been really, really, really hard to get this data. I submitted my FOIA request in October of 2020. After talking with Detroit HUD and HUD in DC for about 6 weeks, back and forth, how do I get access to agency level information? And they said politely, we're not going to give you that. It's not public information that we provide. I'm like, well, this is aggregate data that has no confidential information in it, so by definition, it's public information. Luckily, Representative Tlaib and her team collaborated with me over the course of almost 11 months to pry this information out. And quite frankly, we didn't get it until Representative Tlaib called an undersecretary and said, what's up with this? So when that happened, bam, 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 here comes a buffet of PDF files. So as we think about the work that HUD's been doing, I encourage you to yourself, or I encourage someone on your team to go look at some of these HUD reports that are out there. And this Housing Counseling Works piece from 2017 that they put out is a nice sort of aggregate summary of evidence-based reporting on homebuyer education. I'm spending a few minutes on this because, drawing the lines between a long list of data points to get to a conclusion that is actionable is oftentimes really hard for people to get their heads wrapped around. So the bird seed to get there, this kind of background research is a big part of that. So this mythical 9902 data. So like I said, I've been participating in homebuyer education courses since 2013, and I knew that all of that information gets rolled up into some sort of reporting metric. How does an organization become a HUD-certified education agency? Well, there's a whole website dedicated to that, and there's a lot of time and money invested by education agencies to get this designation. And it's no joke work and continuing education and participation in conferences. So a lot of energy and dollars get invested to just getting the agency certified. In order to be able to actually teach the classes, then you actually need individuals certified to teach as well. So there's yet another sort of barrier to engagement, if you will, that ensures a degree of quality and I think some degree of standardization of what information is being taught so that it's compliant with all of the fair housing and all that good stuff. So the activities are reported quarterly on the Form 9902, which you can Google if you want, and it has a really nice matrix of information that is super helpful. So what is that information? First, here's an acknowledgement to the 14 agencies whose data we'll be presenting on today. So when I began looking at this in 2020, there were 16 such agencies listed on the HUD website. And we received data for 14 of the 16 in September. Not all of these agencies are active in every year. So we purposefully are reporting on this information as an aggregate because we're not trying to compare, analyze, indict, or anything else for individual agencies. We're talking about what is the gross number of folks that are moving through this system and what are some of their outcomes. So if folks are interested in having conversations with, say, Bridging Communities, their executive director is in the room today. I don't know if she wants to be called out, so I won't say her name, but many of you already know who she is. And we have other participants. I think Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation may be in the room today, along with Southwest Economic and others. So these are the folks that are doing the work on the ground in the city of Detroit, helping people understand what the opportunity of homeownership looks like. So I said, wow, 16 agencies, that's a lot. I wonder if that means that we do way better than everybody else in the country because we have twice as many homebuyer education agencies as does any other city in the United States with between 600 and 700,000 people. And Detroiters have this sort of fun ongoing framing that Detroit is such a huge city. And yes, we are. We have 138 square miles, no joke, lots of space to cover. But we are not the hugest city. OKC, Oklahoma City, has 3 such agencies and 603 square miles. So there's a wide diversity of cities here, some of which are reasonably comparable to the city of Detroit. And one of my next asks of the Congresswoman and her team is, I want agency data for all these other folks. And I want to start digging into the process of, what are they doing in Memphis for homebuyer education, and what do their outcomes look like with 7 agencies versus the 14 to 17. I think another one just joined, so we're up to 17 now in the city. What are some best practices and outcomes? Because I don't know that information is readily available in the marketplace. So thinking about this 9902 data, what did we get? So this information has not been published to our knowledge in the recent past. This may come out at like a HUD conference or something like that, but normal humans don't have access to this information. So we looked at the years from the federal fiscal year 2014-15 through 18-19. So we've got a 5-year period between the Great Recession and what happened in 2020. So we purposely, again, reported here in aggregate because, it's not finger pointing or lifting up anyone in particular. And this is the best available information from a trusted data source. So agencies are reporting this information, they're putting it on a form, they're signing an affidavit, and they're sending it up to HUD as this is the real and true. And the limitations and opportunity for improvement are plentiful, so we supplemented the 9902 data review with a survey. So what does it look like? One of the first questions I had, which is something I often do when I'm looking at Detroit-based data, is there any indicator that the work being done is consistent with the makeup of our city? When we look at mortgage data, in most city council districts, less than 20% of the single-family home transfers are done with mortgages, and of those mortgages, 50% go to white folks. Well, that is not concurrent with the makeup of our city and is part and parcel of this list of problems that we have. So seeing that 67% of the program participants out of the 18,000 were self-identified as Black or African American was a really important sort of early indicator that this data is consistent with the makeup of our city. It's not an exact match to what our 2019 census figures look like, but it is a supermajority of the people that are taking these programs. So, okay, check. Number one, it is pretty close. Could be improved, but pretty close to what our city actually looks like. Next, I think arguably even a stronger indicator is that 51% of the participants self-report at being 49% or less of area median income. Okay, lots of complicated terms there that some people may not understand. So what is area median income? So the Census and Bureau of Labor Statistics put out area median income. It is a median household income figure for the Detroit, Warren, Livonia statistical area. So that number is 63,475 for what the median for the region would be. That's important because an awful lot of measures for federal spending are tied to this area MSA. In the city of Detroit, according to the 2019 census data, the household median income is $30,894. So our research is pointed at how do we assist or make it easier for folks at this median income level to accomplish homeownership, and these homebuyer education classes are directly pointed at that outcome. So when we say that 49% of the folks that are taking this, or I'm sorry, 51% of the folks that are taking this class are 49% or below, well, that's right in alignment with where Detroit's median household income is. And that's a really important indicator of who's the audience that you're talking to, what kinds of resources can you extrapolate that they would have if the household is making less than $35,000 a year, et cetera, et cetera. Over 100% AMI, we still have a 9%. So even folks that make more than $63,000 a year still find benefit from this education process. So being representative has been really important in this analysis work. So what is this HUD data? So completion of an approved homebuyer education program is the key to obtaining down payment assistance. Down payment assistance through MSHDA is roughly $10,000. I think that might go a little bit higher now even. And that $10,000 is oftentimes enough to cover the closing costs plus the portion of your down payment. Typically, a person participating in this class will have between $1,000 and $5,000 saved. So that in combination with the DPA is what really allows the process to move forward. And DPA is a really important braided funding source for thinking about solving for the cash flow challenges in putting this type of program together. The city right now is considering rolling out a new DPA program, and that's great. But the challenge is we have so few people closing homes and there's so many other barriers to getting through that I'm really afraid the DPA dollars that the city's going to put on the table through the ARP funds aren't going to be used because these other pieces haven't yet been connected in the larger puzzle. 5 minutes left. Thank you. So when we look at these opportunities, we know that the Michigan State Housing Development Authority closed 414 DPA loans in the city of Detroit during this time period. And that was ranked number 8 of municipalities in the state of Michigan. And ultimately, almost all of those loans went to neighborhoods which get higher mortgage percentages and have NEZ tax abatements. So the neighborhoods that don't have the stability don't get DPA loans, by and large. So when we think about the HUD data overall, here's the numbers that folks haven't likely seen before. So again, we've got over 18,000 people that go through the programs. These programs have a wide diversity of training opportunities. From those programs, from those folks, 41% of them took completed homebuyer education programming. So we've got 7,458 humans in the city of Detroit and potentially adjacent neighborhoods, neighboring cities, that spent 6 to 8 hours of their time to go through a class, and we know that the majority of them are at 50% or less AMI. So you got motivated folks. Of those 41%, 1,445 ultimately ended up purchasing a home in this 5-year period. So the numbers are incredibly low. There's a whole bunch of different reasons for why those numbers are likely that low, and my colleague Patrick will be talking about a number of different data sources in a few minutes. So what we did to keep moving this piece is we needed to sort of verify some information about the gaps that we saw in the HUD data. So Southwest Economic Solutions, our partner, had 1,400 people in their database from this time period that took classes with them, and we sent out a fairly detailed survey. We also sent this survey to other home counseling education agencies, and there's some evidence in the data that folks may have taken the survey from those other organizations. So thank you to those who distributed the survey question. And we found, both through my own individual conversations with homebuyer agencies and others, that quite frankly, looking backwards and figuring these things out hadn't really been on the priority list. There was one other agency that had recently surveyed some of its own participants, but when we were presenting this information to them in one-to-one, it's like, okay, well, we hadn't even looked at some of this. So we're busy doing all of the things we need to keep a program running, and being reflective isn't really been in the sort of grant investment dollars that we received to run our programs. So thank you for sharing this with us. And the self-identification on home purchases are likely underreported on this form. So of the 1,400, it might be underreported by a little bit or a lot. We're not entirely sure, but we know what's been reported to the federal government. Those 1,400 people that purchased homes is there. And this survey function, I think, provides some additional context. So we had the 1,400 past participants, 16% response rate, which for those of you in the survey space is pretty darn good, all things considered. And there was an incentive provided. We had a drawing for some gift cards for up to 5 of those folks. On those 220 respondents, 99% of them found the class to be helpful. Okay, so that's cool. You spent 6 to 8 hours of your time and you got something out of it? Sweet. So that was a good piece, and think tribute to the work that SWES does, Southwest Economic Solutions, in their education process. Less than 10% of those folks ended up buying a home in Oakland, Macomb, or another place. So 90% of the respondents bought a home in either Detroit or Wayne County. Of the 77 respondents who purchased a home, 45 of them purchased in the city of Detroit. 43 were approved for a loan greater than $75,000. So almost all of the folks going through these programs are getting approved for loans that are in that spot that the Congresswoman was talking about, where I was on a CRA conference a week or two ago, and I was asking some pretty detailed questions of the bankers that were in the room, and there was kind of an uncomfortable chuckle and almost a dark humor approach to answering the question of how do we get loans closed sub $100,000. They're like, yes, we do that, but no, we don't. And my experience with buyers that are trying to get a mortgage for $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000, the underwriting experience is much, much different than for folks that are trying to buy a house for $200,000 or $300,000. The bank doesn't make enough money off this, and the loan officer is going to be burning a lot of time that they don't necessarily have, and things get awkward sometimes with me and some of my lenders for that purpose. 44 had mortgages less than $800 a month. So this is all important because it's building that birdseed of how do we get to solutions. We know we have motivated people, we know they reflect the city of Detroit, and we know that 1,445 of those completing pre-purchase program ultimately purchased the home. So with that, I think that we have a lot of information and a lot of data on the table. So take a deep breath. We'll try to make this interactive here in a little bit, and my colleague Patrick is going to come up and start talking about some of the other data sources that help with that birdseed chain. Yep, so a question in the back real quick?
I had a question about those that got loans and purchased the homes. Do you have data on their income level?
I think we do. To some extent. So the question was, do we have data on the income level of the folks that did purchase homes? And some of that information is available. So Patrick will take over from here, and we'll continue on the data adventure. Thank you for staying with us. If you do need to grab a cup of coffee, there's still some out there, but stay in the room because some of these maps, I think, are super interesting when we look at the neighborhood cluster level.
Okay, thank you for that, David. My name is Patrick Meehan. I'm the program manager at the Center for Equitable Family and Community Wellbeing at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. And as we were kind of waiting on this 9902 data for several months, the research team was really thinking about what is the context of homeownership that these pre-purchase housing counseling participants actually enter into after they complete these programs. Oh, sorry. And so I wanted to speak a little bit about how we approached answering that question. And this was kind of new territory for us as researchers at the center. And so because as David was alluding to in that literature review, there's been a lot of research in this space, and we wanted to make a genuine contribution to the knowledge base around Detroit home ownership. So we really leaned on our community partners at Southwest Economic Solutions and David to understand what information would be the most helpful to the conversation on Detroit home ownership. So we were really thinking about questions about, well, where is demand in the city for single family homes? Where are people buying homes? What does the mortgage market look like across the city of Detroit? And so there were kind of two large data needs that we needed for our project. And the first was data on property sales in the city, and the second was data on mortgage availability in the city. So I'll speak to the property sales data first. So the data that we used in this project came from the Detroit City Assessor's Office, and it covered years 2009 to 2019. Come on again. And this was by way of our friends at Data Driven Detroit. But there were some key features to this data that I think are helpful to understanding how it works. So each row of the data was an individual parcel that was sold at some point, or at least transferred ownership at some point between the years 2009 and 2019. So the features of the data included this parcel ID. It included a geographic ID, which was a combination of the state, county, and census tract information. Included the date of the sale, or at least the transfer of ownership of the property. That's helpful. Just as kind of clarifying the language, I kind of use the term sale and transfer interchangeably, but in looking at this data, there were instances in which property kind of changed hands without necessarily qualifying as like a sale in the traditional sense. So it's just kind of helpful to keep in mind that sometimes we use the terms transfer and sale kind of interchangeably. The price at which the property was sold, the terms of the sale, this refers to something like the valid arm's length transaction, which is kind of what you traditionally think of when two people purchase a home. You're using like real estate agents, two people don't know each other. That's what we think of as a valid arm's length transaction or a foreclosure. Those would be the kind of terms under which the sale took place. The sale instrument, so this refers to the type of deed that was transferred, whether it was a warranty deed or some other type of deed that transferred ownership of the property. And then the class of the property, meaning either was it a commercial property, was it a residential property, was it an agricultural property, that sort of thing. For the mortgage data, for our project, it kind of came in two different batches, both from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Excuse me. So the first batch was from the home mortgage database, as David was alluding to, this HMDA data that was from the public use data file and covered the years 2007 to 2019. It's available to anybody who kind of goes to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau website. So it's a very large data set that tracks each sort of mortgage loan application across the country. So when we were pulling information for this, we were only kind of interested in Michigan, and then we filtered specifically on Wayne County. And then the second batch of data wasn't from the public use data file, but it did cover the years 2018 and 2019. So what was slightly different about this is that in the public use data file, as I mentioned, each row of data is like an actual individual mortgage loan application, whereas in this second batch of data, they had already kind of gone through the process of kind of aggregating, which is to say totaling up all of the loan applications at the census tract level. But some common features across both sets of mortgage data were that it included the loan's purpose, which is to say, was it for a home purchase? Was it for a home refinance, or was it for a home improvement loan? The action taken on the loan, was it originated? Was it denied? Was there something else about the loan? The amount on the loan, and then as I was alluding to, the census tract for the property under consideration for the loan. So we wanted to kind of find a way to have these data sort of speak to each other. So as I was mentioning, the property sales data was kind of individual parcels. We could geocode those and put them on a map, but kind of what you would end up looking at is kind of just a big cluster of dots on a map. What it might have been more helpful is if we could aggregate the total number of sales that happen in a particular geographic unit within the city. And so there we're kind of thinking about, well, are there trends that we can find at sort of a neighborhood level in the city to better visualize disparities in Detroit in terms of where homes are being bought and sold. And similarly with the mortgage data, if we could aggregate at a sort of a higher level of geographic area, then we could maybe better understand some lending patterns across the city. And so what we needed was a common geographic unit of measurement for both sets of data. And so what this map is showing, and unfortunately it's a little bit hard to read, is that so there are kind of three levels of data, or three layers to this map of Detroit here. On the lowest level, the kind of very small numbers there, those are all of the census tracts in Detroit for the 2010 census. And what's helpful about this is that if you expand out to a sort of a larger geographic unit, and this was, as David was alluding to, neighborhood clusters that Data-Driven Detroit had kind of defined, you can see that the census tracts rather comfortably fit under those geographic markers. So the black lines on the map, the bolder, the thicker black lines on the map represent these neighborhood clusters as defined by Data-Driven Detroit. And so by using this map, you can kind of see which census tracts refer to which neighborhoods. And then at a further level of aggregation, you can look at the city council districts in Detroit. So those red lines are the council districts in Detroit. So by virtue of having these kind of, these different, it's sort of a key to defining the neighborhood and city council districts, you can sort of aggregate both the property sales and the mortgage data to whatever kind of geographic unit you're interested in. And so as I was alluding to, using the census tract, we could identify each property's or mortgage's respective neighborhood or council district. And so for our analysis, we were really only interested in residential properties. And so we excluded all sort of commercial or industrial agricultural properties and so forth. And then for the mortgage data, we're really only interested in originated home purchase loans from the HMDA data. And then we wanted the data to include common years. So we were looking at years 2015 to 2019 to correspond with the pre-purchase housing counseling data that David was mentioning in the previous presentation. And so we looked at a total of 46,894 properties across the city of Detroit and 6,639 mortgages. And so the residential property sales served as kind of a denominator for our purposes in our analysis, which is to say sort of the total volume of property sales that happened in that geographic area. Whereas the mortgage sales served as as a numerator, so that allows us to just kind of divide the number of mortgage sales by the number of property sales. And that would provide us with a percentage of mortgage sales that happened in that particular geographic area. So what did we actually find? So starting in 2015, I'll help you kind of understand the map that you're looking at. So the mortgage sales are color-coded. The lighter colors represent a lower percentage of mortgage sales, and the darker colors represent a higher percentage of mortgage sales. Whereas the little blue bubbles on the map represent the number of property sales in that particular neighborhood cluster. So the bigger the bubble, the larger the number of property sales. And so in 2015, the neighborhoods with the highest percentage of mortgage sales were kind of in the downtown core area, this what Data Driven Detroit labeled as this central business district, lower Woodward area, the near east riverfront. But that isn't necessarily where most of the property sales were actually happening in the city of Detroit. So in actual fact, the neighborhoods with the largest number of property sales were in this Grandmont neighborhood, which is on the city's west side. Right here, it's actually labeled as Cervini/Grandmont. Finney, which is on Detroit's east side, and then Rouge, which is on the city's west side. But in each of those neighborhoods, the percentage of mortgage sales was less than 20%. Similar trends in 2016. Again, the same kind of neighborhoods had the highest percentage of mortgage sales in the downtown area. Also Indian Village, again on the riverfront. And then the same three neighborhoods had the highest number of property sales. This Finney, Grandmont, and Rouge in 2016, but again, neither of those neighborhoods had a very high percentage of mortgage sales. Similar in 2017, again, the Central Business District had 100% of all residential sales financed through mortgages. In 2017, the Corktown neighborhood, the Near East Riverfront neighborhood, and then, again, the same three neighborhoods were actually the highest in property sales in 2017, but neither of them had more than 20% of their homes or properties financed with mortgages. 2018 was kind of the highest volume of property sales that we looked at in our data. So in 2018, the Grandmont neighborhood had 655 property sales in that year, which was the highest total we saw across all 5 years. But again, this central business district in the downtown area was where the highest percentage of mortgage sales was happening, but that's not necessarily where the volume of property sales is actually happening in the city. And then finally in 2019, we see that the mortgage market is kind of starting to spread a little bit across the city. We'll see that there are areas on the city's north side that have a higher percentage of mortgage sales in 2019. Again, the Central Business District, Lower Woodward, Indian Village are kind of where the highest percentage of mortgage sales are happening. But then again, the kind of similar neighborhoods, Finney, Grandmont, is where the highest volume of actual property sales is taking place. So David had mentioned the down payment assistance loans that were available through the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. So in actual fact, David filed a Freedom of Information Act request for information on those down payment assistance loans across the state of Michigan for the years 2015 to 2019. And so when we were provided with the data, we learned that there were 13,706 down payment assistance loans made across the state between 2015 and 2019, 414 of which were in the city of Detroit, which ranks Detroit 8th among municipalities receiving down payment assistance loans in the state of Michigan, which might be surprising given Detroit is the largest municipality in the state of Michigan. Lansing was number one, actually. Yeah. So we were able to geocode all 414 of those loans, along with a list of homes that were targeted for stabilization through Proposal N. And this is what the map looks like. I apologize if it's a little bit hard to read, but I kind of overlaid the MSHA loans on top of the mortgage information from 2019. And what the kind of the red dots that you see on the map, these are sort of red stars, are where the MSHA DPA loans were made between 2015 and 2019, whereas those green circles represent the homes that were targeted for stabilization through Proposal N. So the MSHA loans more or less kind of track where there's a higher percentage of mortgage sales happening within the city. The Proposal N stabilization homes are kind of in areas where there's less mortgage lending happening in the city. David, did you want to speak to these points a little bit?
A part of this, the birdseed piece that I was talking about earlier, is we have all this public investment. So our tax dollars are going to pay for stabilization of homes in districts where there's almost no mortgage activity. So when we're thinking about how to move those properties into the hands of Detroiters, just like, Stellantis opens, those jobs were prioritized for Detroiters first. Well, if we're putting our own tax dollars into stabilizing properties in these districts, it would make sense to figure out a pathway to get Detroiters the first opportunity to buy those homes. So it really talks about the ecosystem piece that we're thinking about through this research, and that if we want these properties to stay in the hands of Detroiters, and not go to market rate speculators, which is by and large what DLBA has been facilitating, is market rate transfers of auction properties, rehab and ready, these other options that are available, then we need to be really thoughtful about how we actually execute mortgages for this $30,000 to $35,000 income household to get them into the place where this is available. And really the district profiles that you have that were handed out earlier break down the numbers of what each council district looks like in this priority.
Yeah. So briefly, I'll just kind of walk through the district profiles that you picked up. Yeah, Sonia, did you have a question? Yeah.
So for the homes that were purchased, the transfer, the sales, how were people paying for them? Cash?
Yeah, that's a little bit harder to figure out. Yeah, so if it wasn't financed through mortgages, like how is it being paid for?
Can you repeat that for the stream and the recording, please?
Yeah, so the question was, like how are homes being paid for, basically, if they're not being paid for with mortgage financing. And the data that we had from the city assessor's office doesn't really say how the homes were purchased. I guess the best way to find that information out would be to look at the Register of Deeds information from Wayne County. But that data is a little bit harder to kind of navigate and kind of download, and it's not as useful as of a resource. So you'd really have to kind of look at each sale itself. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That's a question.
Maybe I missed it somewhere while David was talking when I was out of the room. Are we getting the demographics on who's actually receiving these loans? Do we know?
Yeah.
Who?
Right.
Talking
So.
about bringing back more homes for African Americans. Who's actually getting the loans? And then the other piece was in terms of Proposal N, having doing the work in communities. We don't know how many of those homes they've actually secured, right? So to rehab, and how many are still unsecured. So, I want us to be cautious and know that even though they're supposed to do all those, as long as those homes go unattended, the worst thing.
Right. So the goalposts have been moving as far as what stabilization means and when it will happen and how it happens. So the dots that are here there's a list on HRD's website of every address where stabilization has been targeted, and that's what's represented here. What actually happens goes back to the Congresswoman's point earlier, is that it's on us to see an opportunity for policy to be implemented the way that's useful for folks on the ground versus other priorities.
But to your point about who's receiving the mortgages, the public use data file from HMDA that I mentioned that covers years 2007 to 2017 actually includes kind of demographic information about the mortgage loan applicant. So there is information on sort of the income of the borrower, the race of the borrower, and so forth. I know Edward Lynch is in the audience. I know his team at Detroit Future City is doing a deeper dive in the HMDA data and can probably speak more to information about differences in terms of demographics and the racial composition of who is receiving mortgages in Detroit. That it wasn't something we necessarily looked at for this project. Yeah.
For the residential transfer data, is there
Yeah.
any breakdown between what was sold to an individual versus to a business entity?
Yeah, I mean, there was sort of the grantor and the grantee of the deed transfer. That wasn't something we necessarily looked at specifically, but yeah, there is that information. Yeah. And yeah, in the back.
I wonder if you or David could elaborate on the point you were making a moment ago about the Detroit land banks properties and the disconnect seemingly between those and the Prop N investments versus communities that are that have been mortgaged in the past. If linking historic mortgages wasn't necessarily the link, what would have been the driver for why those properties were identified?
We don't have a clear criteria for how the Prop N stabilized properties were chosen. We didn't get into that sort of underlining information. But I mean, generally, the public remarks that I've tracked over time are that these properties are structurally able to make the leap back to a certificate of occupancy again. Versus other properties that had extensive fire damage or water damage. So the properties that are identified from Prop N, the city has determined that they are worthy of saving rather than tearing down. And the disposition of properties that are upgraded, I think, is still an open question as a matter of policy. Because if they become stabilized with tax dollars and then go to the auction for any human to purchase via the interwebs, that's one thing. If they go into the rehabbed and ready pipeline, then those are sold at market rate, which by definition are unaffordable for median income Detroiters. And if they go to a different stream, then that stream hasn't been very well developed yet and would arguably require considerable collaboration between community development organizations, homebuyer education agencies, and others that can move this funnel of demand. So we've created a demand metric for median income Detroiters who want to buy single-family homes with the HUD 9902 data. So we know 1,500 people every year are going through these programs approximately, and they have some degree of sophistication that has been built to purchase a home. And then there's a laundry list of opportunities to make sure that that actually closes.
I appreciate all the questions. This is kind of all the time we had for our data presentation. I just would encourage you that if you're interested in more information, you can visit our website at the Center for Equitable Family and Community Wellbeing, which is at the bottom of this page. There you can find a dashboard that we've made that includes data on all of these kind of points for different neighborhoods across the city. So each data point includes sort of the number of property transfers that was in that neighborhood, the number of mortgages, the median transfer price, the median mortgage amount, and the percent of mortgage sales for each of the years in our data.
So if we could invite our panelists to come up, we want to get you mic'd up, and we'll make that transition to the feedback portion.
Thanks, everybody.
On the front side of the sheet, you've got sort of quick facts about each council district, along with the neighborhood clusters that are embedded therein. We have the quick facts, which talk about the population, the percentage of minority residents, as well as the median household income. On the property transfer data, this is where we get into the difference between property transfers and mortgage data. Which is helpful for context because on the first line you can see the median residential transfer price for each year in that district. So the low numbers across the first line are what people are buying in this cash marketplace largely. And then the next line is regarding the mortgage amount. So the mortgages in the districts vary widely between neighborhoods. And I have District 1 in my hand right now, going from $68,000 to $328,000 for the median mortgage amount for those years. Additional information that's on here is the total number of transfers, percentage of mortgage sales, and foreclosures. The MSHDA piece has the information about how many MSHDA loans were made during that time period. And that Prop N number on the bottom right-hand corner is the number of homes that are identified for Prop N within the district. The backside, we did some simple math for folks because, okay, that's all great, but how does that relate to actually a median income Detroit household getting a mortgage? So the graphic on the back talks about median household income, what 30% of their income would look like as far as a monthly payment, and then the information about what a mortgage would cost versus what the MLS data shows is available for rent.
On the 30% of what that would cost, that's just the mortgage. That doesn't include other factors like utilities, insurance.
So the mortgage calculation is interest, principal, insurance, and taxes as calculated at mortgagecalculator.org. So I think the panel's now all set, and I'll pass it. We've got one more coming. So the other piece that's on this document is a brief summary, since a lot of people talk good game about using data, but they don't always have the context. So this context in the paragraph sort of explains to you, the reader, what is actually happening in the situation. And then all of the source material is there listed so you can go do due diligence on your own. So looks like Ruth is going to be joining us in a second, but Hector, if you want to get us started.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? A little bit. Turning it. Can you hear me now?
Got to keep talking.
It's good? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Hector Hernandez. I'm the Executive Director for Southwest Economic Solutions. Glad to be with you here. I've been dabbling in the affordable housing industry in different sectors since 1989, and I don't think I've ever seen it dissected and presented in this manner, easily digestible, unfiltered, and the data kind of speaks for itself. So glad to be with you today. I need to add my kudos to the team, to David and Patrick and Lucine and Lucas and Elizabeth and Trina and Alex for their contributions to assemble all this information so that you can see the presentations today. The team, as David alluded to, was tenacious. I mean, literally moving mountains to assemble this data, never taking no for an answer. So, kudos to their diligence in securing that data and then assembling it into something that we can digest, and they then distilled it into something that we can understand. And it speaks to the challenges in this market, and it's been an ongoing challenge for many, many years. This data now validates what we all intuitively have known for a long time, and that's that the Detroit mortgage market is not working the way it's designed to, the way it's supposed to, and that these challenges affect a specific sector of the prospective home buyers in Detroit. And so the opportunity is now for us to dissect that, to look at that, and then create opportunities to overcome that challenge. So with that, we'll transition to a terrific and highly talented group of panelists, which will speak to what we've all seen earlier today. So I'd ask that you save your questions to the end. We'll work them in after the presentations, assuming we have time. If not, we'll take them all in the breakout. So let me first introduce Ruth Johnson. Ruth is the Public Policy Director at the Community Development Advocates of Detroit. Ruth has experience working with hard-to-reach and underserved communities, including racial and ethnic minorities, language and literacy deficiencies, and the very young and very old. Her work includes helping community groups develop policy agendas and implement strategies to transform issues into meaningful, effective action. As part of this work, she connects these groups to partners and allies on the local, state, and national levels to magnify the impact of their actions. Next to Ruth is Steve Tomkowiak. Steve is the executive director of the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit, one of the oldest fair housing centers in the nation. Prior to serving as executive director, he spent 28 years specializing in the litigation and trial of mortgage lending and fair housing cases. Steve also serves as a course developer and instructor with HUD's National Fair Housing Training Academy and is a frequent trainer for housing providers, management companies, realtors, lending institutions, private, municipal, legal services attorneys, municipalities, homeowners, and tenants. So welcome, Steve. Full disclosure, I'm a member of the Fair Housing Board, so I know of Tim's work personally. He does yeoman's work. Kimberly Faison, former colleague at Southwest Economic Solutions, is the Director of the Community and Economic Development at Detroit Future City. She brings nearly 2 decades of experience in the economic and community development space. In this role, she serves as convener, facilitator, and project manager for the Detroit Housing Compact, with the goal of strengthening the single-family housing delivery system by bringing together public, private, nonprofit, and philanthropic stakeholders to take collective action and regularly collaborate around strategies for building a healthier housing market. Last but certainly not least is Tim Thorland, Executive Director for Southwest Housing Solutions. He's a colleague of mine. Tim has developed over 750, maybe 800 plus units of low-income housing tax credit affordable housing units, including 150 project-based units at Paquette Square, a development created for formerly homeless veterans. Additionally, he has a team that has developed over 100,000 square feet of commercial property that they now own and manage. He developed Michigan Lending Solutions. He is an REO expert, acquisition rehab, and putting them back on the rolls. A thought leader in the affordable housing, urban planning space, and a problem solver extraordinaire. So big hand for the panelists, and then we'll jump in. So Ruth, I'd like to start with you. And if you could give me your reactions to the data that we presented, and how it aligns with the work that you're doing. What are the cross sections, the intersections, I should say?
So good morning, everyone. And I just want to thank everybody, David Palmer, everyone else with part of this project for all this hard work. There's some great data. I look forward to digging deeper, and as well as working with David and others in the future to make sure that CDAD members, partners, and others on the neighborhood level have access to this information and can use this information. I would say that I want to distinguish between conclusions, realities, and truth. You heard Representative Tlaib talk about speaking the truth. And I think sometimes data can be part of that, but there are other parts. I am a lifelong student of Kurt Metzer, who tried his best to help me understand data as a policy geek, and I do get it. I do get the importance of data. But I just wanted to share some initial thoughts. Whether you agree or not, we can talk about it later, or even now. I think it's very important to meaningfully and significantly involve impacted persons. So that's Detroit residents, stakeholders, the neighborhood level organizations, and whether it's the data collection, the analysis, the dissemination, use, especially when it comes to policy recommendations. Remember, I said I was a policy geek, so I'm always going to come back to that. But also, there has to be intentional to provide that access to the information and that engagement. And I would hope that, again, that in my role at CDAD and my colleagues at CDAD are members, that we can work with the research team to help that happen. But we have to think about the differences in language and literacy and just life stuff that is going on right now and how to make that information. And that's just whether it's this project or any other project, that's always a concern. But also as a policy geek, and I say that with pride, building power for Detroit residents, stakeholders, organizations, and others in the housing ecosystem to affect structural and systemic change. Because it's not just about the individuals, and I understand we aggregate data and look at it that way, but we also need to look at the structures and the systems. And I would say, especially with policy recommendations or any problem solving, it is so important to always vet and involve those most impacted. But part of the system change, structural change, is just dealing with racial discrimination disparities. And I don't know if this data, and I would like to look at the question that Phyllis, the demographics of who received mortgages. But there's also the data or information I would like to see who didn't apply. And there's some work being done by the Detroit Community Reinvestment Coalition to start gathering that data. But we need to, in order to have the truth, we need a fuller picture. And I would like to say data isn't destiny. The reason I say that is sometimes we can get in the dumps and discouraged or dismayed with data. But I am hopeful because the truth will set us free. I think there are many truths, but this data is one of many tools in our toolbox: policy advocacy, structural change, system change, fighting racism and discrimination. But I'm also going to refer to what Representative Tlaib said, and I think it's going to be important, using the data in effective ways, making sure that things are improved. I always want more money, and it is about the money, honey. It really is, because we do have to fund this work. And I think that's part of the problem is access to data, but also access to the funding and capital needed to have a healthy, equitable, good housing market and housing ecosystem. So those are my initial thoughts. I know that was a lot, but that's my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Ruth. And we'll go around and next to Steve. Same question, reactions to the data and how the work you're doing at the Fair Housing Center aligns with that.
Yeah, my reaction is upset and disappointed. I feel like we should have done more. We should have anticipated this. We should have addressed it. I say that because in the context of looking at it from a fair lending analysis, the law is simply not being complied with. Policies are not being complied with. I could run through it real quick. Representative Talib, her bill proving fair housing support for small loans, draw attention to an Urban League report, Urban Institute study, which showed in 2017, the denial rates for low loans for $70,000 and below were twice that above higher loans. But they didn't just stop there. They analyzed the credit profiles for people under $70,000 and under and over $70,000 and found out they had roughly comparable credit scores. You would think, right, as the data does speak, you would think that lower income people would have worse credit profiles, but they don't. When they control for profiles, match out people with acceptable credit requirements and applying for a loan under $70,000 or a loan over $70,000, the denial rates would be the same, but they weren't. They range from like 26 to 52%. Here's what really bothers me about it. The denial rates remain significantly varying between 29 and 52%. Michigan law says this. When I hear about the not wanting to do minimum or small loans, it just angers me about this. Michigan law says a credit granting institution cannot impose a minimum loan amount above $10,000. That's MCL 445.16024. Then I'm looking at the secondary market requirements. FHA has a $5,000 minimum loan amount. Fannie Mae has no minimum loan amount requirement. None. They don't impose one. In terms of federal policy, going back to 1994, the Interagency Policy Statement on Discrimination in Lending said that they showed as an example of a disparate impact violation a lender's policy not to extend loans for values less than $60,000. So that would be an example of one that would have an adverse impact on minority communities. The OCC, Fair Lending Examination Procedure, OCC, FDIC, Federal Reserve, several bank regulators. In 2009, Fair Lending Examination Procedures referenced that same policy as an example of would be a violation, $60,000 minimum loan policy. The CFPB, back in their July 2013 examination procedures said basically the same thing. Do underwriting policies or procedures contain factors that could have a disproportionate, negative, unjustified impact on a prohibited basis? For example, requiring a minimum loan amount. That's the CFPB. The disturbing thing with this is when the interagency examination procedures, there's a little caveat to what they said about this, going back to 2009. It said, these procedures do not call for examiners to plan examinations to identify or focus on the potential disparate impact issues. Well, it should, but it doesn't. So they're basically telling bank regulators, don't bother looking at this. You can't make this up. It's right in the statement. HUD enforcement, it's quite clear. HUD regards it as a violation. In May 2017, they brought a case against First Indiana Bank's general loan requirements that discriminated against black applicants. They included minimum property value restrictions and minimum loan amounts. The DOJ brought a case against United States versus Luther Burbank Savings, a lender's $400,000 minimum loan amount policy and its wholesale channel discriminated against on grounds of race and national origin. So when I look at this and seeing that they're doing it, of course, you know, David said he's in a conference and they're not giving good explanations of why they're turning down small dollar loans, because they know they can't. This has been consistent since 1994. I mean, I go back, name my age, I go back far enough to the 1980s where if you want to buy a home in Detroit, you had to do a cash sale or a land contract, period. And then when they had the Great Recession, all the other cities had a pickup in their lending activity except Detroit. The Urban Institute had a map and you could show, it would show the dots and it would take you through a progression year by year by year, and you would see where the loans would then increase in all the, you know, metropolitan areas except Detroit. And we're now into 2019 before there's any kind of an uptick. But this is just wrong. It's illegal. It's not allowed to happen. So yeah, the data speaks volumes, but you know, we're sitting here with violations of the law right in front of us. Representative Tlaib did not put in her bill a requirement. You know, she didn't need to put in a requirement that they extend small dollar loans. It's already there. She's just trying to open up the window or open up the door so we can have access to that information showing exactly what's going on with this. There has always been a problem with lenders not wanting to do small dollar loans. But that's what it is to do business. If any, whether it's realtor services or lending or insurance or anything, any kind of a product, if someone has some type of a minimum policy or, you know, they require, like, so they want to sell high ticket items, that's going to have a disproportionate adverse impact on minority communities, and that's illegal. That's just illegal. So that's not the solution to exclude certain areas. And if you want to put it in another term, it's tantamount to redlining. When you put the map up like that, it begins to look like redlining. If we took those minimum small dollar loan values and we charted over the entire metropolitan Detroit area, it would coincide with minority communities. That's what we're dealing with here. So that's, I'm coming from a fair lending analysis or fair housing analysis. That's what I see. So you can see why I'm disturbed with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Kimberly, same question, you know, reactions to the data. How does it intersect with your work?
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right. How can I follow that? I would say that, I mean, the data tracks with what we're hearing from practitioners. Our work is a little bit different in that, you know, we really serve as a cross-sector intermediary and a convener. And I say, I often borrow a term from a former colleague that our role is to reveal the system to itself. So the compact consists of about 80 individuals who regularly participate in convenings across the year. Our sole focus is the single-family housing system. And what we try to serve, our role is really serving as a clearinghouse, and it's an opportunity for us to know who's doing what in the space. And so while banking and lending is a really critical part of this issue, it's not the only part, and it's not the only place where we're seeing, you know, gaps and opportunities to have greater alignment. So we regularly convene a number of practitioners who are from the banking and lending space, who are from the nonprofit sector that may be mission-driven and place-based in nature, or could be working in policy and advocacy work. We have a number of individuals from various public sector agencies. And really, what we have been striving to do is to really have greater alignment so that we can get to a point where there's a lot more action that is happening, so that we can find these lever points to pull. I would say that in terms of where we go from here, I think there's just a lot of opportunity for system alignment. One of the things that we have been working on from the compact perspective is that our advisory committee has recently adopted goals, and one of those goals is about creating home ownership opportunities for people who make less than $50,000 a year. And so by 2025, we want to see 3,500 homeowners created. And in terms of really digging in deeper as the convener towards achieving those goals, we have kind of put online something called an ecosystem tracker. And so we are now identifying and tracking initiatives, policy and advocacy work, programs, and bodies of research like you've heard today, so that we can get better at anticipating where there are lever points where we can be more action-oriented as a system. So while this data is painful to hear, I'm also optimistic because there's so much good work that's happening in the system, and we think that our role is to dig deeper into understanding what is happening and when there are some really critical opportunities to come together. And then when we can amplify really good work that is happening in the system. So I feel like that's a good place to stop.
Thank you, Kimberly. Tim, super interested as a developer of single-family move-in REO property acquisition rehab and lender. I mean, I'm really interested in hearing your perspectives and thoughts on what we presented.
Sure, thanks, Hector. Good morning. Let me run at this a couple different ways. Your initial question is, what's my reaction to the data? Well, I'm not the least bit surprised. I can't imagine that this isn't something that we've all known and recognized anecdotally over the years. But it's important that it gets put on the screen and everybody can visualize it, and it's up there in somewhat of a non-refutable way, right? The numbers don't lie. They are what they are. In how we get moving past this and starting to make some progress, I think one thing that I'd like to throw in that maybe is a little bit anecdotally, we operate a small mortgage fund. And we have created 42 homeowners in the last 24 months. These are people who have real mortgages. The mortgages just come from us. They don't come from a financial institution. Part of the way that we get over this issue is we find ways to get capital into the hands of folks who have the will and the mission and the desire to create small mortgages for people with lesser credit profiles who aren't beholden to stockholders and other parts of the industry that force these really poor and disenfranchising decisions. So I think that's something that we can all do in our daily lives is trying to pressure folks who have money. Banks don't have to lend money to an individual to create a home ownership opportunity. They can invest in organizations and get the same type of CRA credit from the regulators, and then you have an organization or organizations who are in control of how that capital flows. I'm not the least bit surprised. It's frustrating. We've seen success. Of our 42 buyers, only one of them is paying more in their principal, interest, taxes, and insurance than they were paying in rent. Only one. And they're only paying $15 a month more. What does that mean for somebody at the end of the day? Over the life of a 15-year mortgage, they were going to pay $111,000 in rent over those 15 years. and they're only going to pay $84,000 in principal, interest, tax, and insurance. And even when you factor in other things like maintenance, one-time hits, things like that, they're probably going to net $8,000 over the life, positive to them. And this is somebody who has a profile just like you see on these sheets, you know, at the top in that little pink box there. That's how much money these folks make. This is the kind of resources that they have, and this is all impactful to them. From an equity perspective, we sell the house for about $60,000, and we give back from our equity a $20,000 soft second. That holds the buyer's feet to the fire, right? We forgive that over 5 years. If they want to flip, if they want to move on, they share that equity back. We can reinvest it in the program. But after that, the reins are off and the equity is theirs. And after 15 years, even with just modest appreciation on that real estate, 1 or 2% a year, they're going to have $90,000 worth of equity when that mortgage is paid off. So it doesn't take a lot to get this moving. But when you look at the borrowers that we've dealt with, only 1, maybe 2 at most, could have actually walked in a bank and navigated through that process, not just because of their credit profile, but because of the cash resources that they have, because the geography the house is located in, you know, any number of reasons why, and you know, to the small, you know, the small loan thing, you know, banks, you know, refuse to make small loans all the time. Well, to the extent that they accept that application, they make the process of getting through underwriting so rigorous and so debilitating for the buyer. We took our very first buyer to a bank. I won't name the bank, it's not important. We took him to a bank, and we worked through the underwriting process side by side with that buyer for 75 days to try and get that loan approved, and we got nowhere. I know it's one loan, but I'm telling you, this is it's more than just anecdotal. This is the facts of everything that everybody faces. The one thing that I'd add to this about the data is that it's understated. When you think about how many people have tried to go through the process, and we can document that they've attempted to buy a home, that they've gone through homebuyer counseling, they've sought out the education and the opportunity. Of the 42 buyers that we've worked with, almost none of them ever considered the fact that they could own a home. They never even attempted. Most of our work has not been on the financial education or the home ownership education side. That's a component of what we do. We've had to do an equal amount of work with those buyers in helping build trust with them and helping them understand from their life state that they actually could be a home buyer. There's a whole segment of folks out there who have an opportunity who don't even recognize that it exists.
Thank you, Tim. So you see, we have the makings of a braided and equitable solution to this challenge if we work together to address it. I'm sure you'll have questions, though, so let me open the floor up and allow you to ask some questions of our panel, and then we'll give the panel, you know, after that an opportunity to have some closing remarks as well. I think we have enough time. Anyone? Phyllis?
Yeah, I really appreciate the panel's comments. I think I'm loud enough, no? I really appreciate the panel's comments, and I agree with what I've heard. One of the questions I want to ask is that, Tim, you said that there are plenty of opportunities, well, there are plenty of homeowners out there, or potential homeowners rather, who should be able to take advantage of these opportunities. And I applaud your work, and I agree with you that the banks can certainly do a different way of investing, including land contracts. I have to put that out there. What do you think is a strategy that we could use to really make those potential homeowners aware of these opportunities that are before us?
Well, there's a couple of different things come to mind. So, for me, in almost all aspects of community development work, especially where you're trying to forge ahead and break new ground, there requires proof of concept, right? That's how you get funders and supporters on board. Within the Detroit housing market, there are about 1,200 low-income housing tax credit single-family homes that have the opportunity to transition renters to owners. And nearly half of those are available today to complete that exercise. And within the next 5 years, they will have all matured. So there's low-hanging fruit sitting out there to create 1,200 homeowners in this city. But we need outreach, right? We need people who understand how to build trust with these individuals and how to educate them on the benefits and the opportunity of homeownership. So all of these 1,200 need to be spoken to one-on-one. And we need to develop a capital pool and a financing structure so that we in this room can operate a mortgage program that will facilitate this. It's exactly what we're doing with the 42 that we've created. Out of those 42, 5 people have been delinquent over the last 3 years. 4 of those cured themselves. 1 of them was serious, and it was a COVID-related employment problem. We had to intervene. We were able to help them correct, and now they're back on track. These are 42 borrowers that basically wouldn't meet a credit profile of a bank. The oldest loan is almost 3 years old, and we've had 0 defaults. So there's nothing out there to say that this can't be done. It can be done.
Tim, the demographics of those homeowners now?
Well, so economically, they're like you see on your sheet. Socially, I think out of the 42, 34 African American, 8 Hispanic, Latino, about 65 or 70% are female head of household.
Equity for our black and brown community.
I want to clap for that.
Other questions, anyone?
All right, I'm not good with a mic. So I'll see if I can phrase this. So to Steve, when you were talking about that very large percentage of folks who credit-wise qualified couldn't get a loan, do we have reasons given versus reasons of truth as to why they were denied?
The study controlled for credit, so it should have been the same. Should have been the same. I mean, it's not, it's incumbent upon the lender to give a reason why someone is turned down, right? You have to go file by file. I mean, it's, if I do lending cases, it takes a long way, steps to get there. But once you get there where you can then look at comparable files and receive them and analyze them, then the case is over at that point because they're not able to explain it. And you're left with the conclusion, well, you know, it's the unlawful policy. It's a minimum loan. Again, they don't come out, then you're not going to get 100% approval over 70,000 or 100% denial under 70. And it's never going to be like that, right? But statistics will make the case, right? You know, 0.01 level of significance. If someone meets the guidelines and they meet the qualifications, I'm quite certain that, Tim walking someone through that process, I would think he probably met every requirement and demand that they put on you. Okay, that's a violation right there. We should have received that complaint, right there. That's the concern I have. We've been working with Southwest Solutions, and Hector and others invited us, Alex, to participate, do a short, fair lending discussion for anywhere between a half hour and an hour at the end of their monthly homebuyer education class. We've done that for about a year. And a couple people mentioned that they were turned down because of minimum loan policies. So, and that's just not right. And I said, well, you know, make a complaint with us, and they didn't do that. You know, so we'll probably have to do something like that on our own. Again, it's not to where it sounds like negative, really attack and challenge or whatever, but it doesn't force anything that they're not supposed to be doing. We're really having lenders make money on those loans. Certainly, I'm not saying it doesn't take more work. It can take more work on a low volume, you know, low dollar loan than it would be on a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 loan. No doubt about it. The profit margin is not going to be as great. But that's what we do. We're professionals, whether we're in the mortgage industry, real estate industry, whatever, and we serve people. That's what we do. And if it takes a little bit of inconvenience sometimes, that's just, you know, we're committed as professionals. So that's all we're asking to do. Not asking to do something, not asking, if it turns out someone, you know, doesn't meet the guidelines, you know, debt ratios or something like that, then perfectly, you know, fine, turn them down. It's no problem at all. We're not dictating the process. We're not dictating the underwriting guidelines. We're not dictating anything. We're just having them follow the guidelines and the requirements that they have to make. And when I talk about, you know, FHA policy or Fannie Mae policy, that means that they can sell that loan on the secondary market like they would a $350,000 loan. It doesn't matter. It doesn't cost the bank. They, you know, Southwest is Susan's doing a great job. They're actually acting as a servicer, their own personal servicer. These banks do not have to even do that. They sell it off and they're done with it. If they want to take back servicing later on, that's up to them, but they don't have to. If they meet the guidelines, again, from the federal level, they're very willing, and this is not, policy doesn't get made by accident. They've indicated expressly that they're willing to accept low dollar loans. And when Representative Tlaib says bipartisan support, that is the view. It's a bipartisan position. So we're not talking anything radical, anything unusual. But where you see down the line is it's forcing people into homes that are not habitable, and that's a shame. Substandard housing, it disrupts communities, it causes turnovers, it leads to people in rental situations where they have housing instability. And we see the same thing in our work, that it deals a lot with families with single female head of households, families with children. We know, all of us intimately know the effects of that. And one other thing too is we have subscription lending patterns. And I just looked at the overall numbers within the United States. So the black population, 12% of the population, but only 6% of the mortgage application pool. And so it runs nationwide. People are not seeing home ownership as a real possibility, and that's really, really sad. So we need to have a national discussion, a local discussion, is to encourage people to say home ownership is something I can consider and is a real achievable possibility. The goal, you know, our clientele are, you know, 85, 90% renters primarily. But home ownership is really the ultimate goal. You own your home, you acquire capital and assets. It's good for your family, it's good for a community. There's nothing negative about home ownership. So anything we can do to further that, we're willing to do it, and appreciate, you know, the work done here to draw attention to this. In terms of housing, this is the most important issue, home ownership.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So should we be encouraging the counseling agencies that we work with to be reporting in closer to real time to you certain
Yes.
types of activities?
Yes.
And I would like to extend an invitation to speak to the Housing Compact.
Yeah, and I've done that before. I've done it, you know, in Phoenix and various places. At times, you know, we speak to them, and it's a common thing. Yeah, in Phoenix, I think there were some describing problems that they had with 8 groups of applicants applying, got turned down. I said, well, what's the ethnicity or anything about? Oh, they're all Hispanic. Oh, you didn't see a fair lending problem with this? No, they didn't. So often they look at it individually, file by file, but not taking a step back and seeing what's going on here. Yeah. David.
Could you
Tying
use the
this all
mic,
together.
please?
Yeah,
So I can hear
waiting
you
for it to
properly?
turn on. There it is.
Okay.
So when I think about tying this all together, earlier I talked about making a birdseed path to get from data, which kind of makes your head swim sometimes, to a conclusion where solutions are actually being worked on. So there's a lot of people in this room that if we're coordinating and collaborating together, we could probably move the system from one place to another. Tim has alluded to this through his comments earlier, but I wanted to hear from Ruth, Steve, and Kimberly. What is the systems level approach that we're taking in the city of Detroit to actually solve for this problem? Because when I look at the landscape, I see lots of silos. I see lots of folks demonstrating outlier examples of success stories, but I don't see the numbers moving over time. So from Ruth, Steve, and Kimberly, what are your thoughts on how this can become a more systemic opportunity to collaborate and solve?
Ruth, we'll start with you.
I'm so glad you asked that question because what I wrote at the top of my page during your and Patrick's presentation is things ain't right. Yes, I know better. I know that's not proper English. I got 2 degrees. And we know things aren't right. Whether you talk to one of Tim's clients or one of Steve's clients, they don't even have to know the law. They don't even have to know the data, but they know things ain't right. The question you're asking, I believe, Dave, is how to make things right. One of the things I say we must do is understand this is about power and money. Power and money. And when you start looking at that, then you understand why laws are not being enforced, why there's some economic incentives and disincentives to continue this current system. I think it also looks at the power and money. When we look at data, we don't always look at the cost to individuals, families, and communities because that's not reported. So whether you're the home buyer who had to pay more, meaning you don't have money now for your child's education or for other things, or you were denied, and then you go to these creative, sometimes predatory practices, we don't have that data. So we really need to look at the power and money. And then the equity and policy approach would be who decides, who pays, who's burdened. And I would encourage us to look on macro as well as micro levels, but asking people to trust systems that have never worked for them is like hit your head against that wall again and again and again. Yes, sometimes the individual or the organization will have successes and nothing wrong, but it's not going to move the needle until we make major system and structural change. And the way I see it is building power for change.
Thank you, Ruth. Steve, so we'll go down the line with brief comments and closing remarks on that same question. Thank you.
Yeah, there was a mention about the Community Reinvestment Act. The NCRC, National Community Reinvestment Coalition, is doing a free conference on the CRA. That's going to be Monday. It's on our website, a flyer for that, fairhousingdetroit.org under events. So that would really help. But I think, to kind of follow up the question, is to kind of draw attention to the lenders that are serving Detroit and serving Detroit well in terms of approval rates. Maybe we need to regularly show that, top lenders and what they're doing and how they're helping. And then maybe from a regulator standpoint, they need to take a look at lenders that are kind of excluding Detroit and other communities. That data is available. We've just not been proactive in terms of getting that information out. So the information is there. We need to do that. But again, and I don't mean it like an attack mode. No, really to applaud the lenders that are doing a great job, and there are many of them. They need to be acknowledged for that. But there are other problems as well. We haven't talked about appraisal discrimination, but that's a big issue nationwide, and it is occurring in the Detroit community. When a home gets devalued with a low appraisal and it affects the sale price or the purchase price, then that becomes the baseline for future valuations of properties. And that's a problem here as it is in other areas. We need to take a look at that as well. But there's data, Patrick looked at that HMDA data, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, which becomes available. It's a little bit slow by the time it finally gets reported. There's a lot that has to be done with it. But that shows a lot of information as well. And by analyzing that HMDA data, we can then get a lot of answers to these questions. But Detroit's not a hands-off community. I think, we serve every community. You go in a store or you buy a car, you pay your money down, you expect to receive a car, don't you? Or you buy milk or bread or anything. You know, you don't beg someone in the supermarket to approve you when you buy groceries. Well, why are we doing that when it comes to loans? Okay, if you're qualified and you meet the qualifications, the expectation is for you to get the loan, not get a bunch of more hurdles up in front of you in the process. So people shouldn't be shy about seeking a home. You're entitled to it. Your money counts as well as anybody else, whether you're seeking a over $70,000 or less than $70,000 home. But just to have that kind of mentality, that it is achievable dream, then you can own your home. And that's the message that we need to get out. And if you're not receiving a loan or you're not being approved, then we need to start asking some questions. That's all. We want to know why a lender isn't serving a community and why lenders that are in Detroit are turning people down. Or maybe they're outside Detroit and they don't want to do these loans. All right, that can't be. Right, people need home ownership. We go back to the days where Detroit is a primarily home ownership city, not a over 50% renter city. That's not the vision for Detroit that any of us have.
Thank you, Steve. Kimberly?
Well, I certainly wouldn't suggest that I have all of the answers, but I definitely believe that the relationship building between all of the practitioners is certainly key to anything that we do. And so while I can't speak to what the entire system can or should do, I will tell you what we will continue to do, which is to deepen relationships and deepen alignment and continue to track the things that are happening around home ownership. So as an example, if there is a body of research like you've heard today, or research that we produce or research by others, what we will be doing moving forward is to not only track the research that comes out, but also to critically analyze the recommendations that come forth and put that forward before our body to determine how we can align as a group and as a system. When there are programs that relate to the goals that we have developed, we will do better at making sure that there is more awareness around those programs. If there are policy and advocacy bodies of work that relate to our goals, we will identify consensus amongst our group to support and advance that work. And if there are initiatives that really speak to systems change, we will be working behind the scenes to be tracking what that is and taking all of that back to our constituents. We have an advisory committee that really oversees like the vision for the compact, and then we have working groups that are really just kind of sharing their great work amongst themselves. And then I anticipate that we will do a lot more in terms of action and ad hoc groups next year. So, I mean, those are some of the things that we're working on. We continue to try to learn about the good work that is happening on the ground. We have a lot of work to do to meet more people, to be on site more, and to be more directly engaged. We've built out our capacity organizationally to be able to do that. We are a research organization, and so we continue to examine quality of life issues, recognizing that it's not just, buying a home it intersects with a lot of quality of life issues, and we continue to examine those and to interrogate the challenges and to do, we attempt to do a good amount of community engagement around that research and to make sure that we're hearing from the community at large about reactions to the things that we're presenting, and to make sure that the recommendations that we put forth are based on lived experience in addition to, the data geeks. So those are some of the things that we're doing organizationally and also as a housing compact, just to have greater systems alignment. So I hope that is a part of the answer. It's not the only answer, but it is certainly like a space that we continue to dig deeper and deeper into.
Thank you, Kimberly. Tim?
Couple of things. I want to believe in my heart that especially what Ruth was emphasized, that with proper advocacy we can promote change. And I believe it's possible, But I also believe that there's a lead time in that, where we also need to be able to create a response today to make impact, right? We can work both lanes at the same time. I really think part of the way to get to the root of solving this problem is for the folks in this room to find a way to control capital. We recognize what the issue is. We all have great ideas that we can contribute to a solution, but we need the capital to institute it. And I think there's a couple of different ways that we can go about that. I know from time to time over the years, I'm contacted by regulators at OCC or FDIC or whoever who are looking for general opinions about their CRA regulation, specific opinions about banks. I think to the extent we have that opportunity, we need to take that more seriously. And we really need to dig in with those regulators and say, look, this is where things need to move. It's part of the way that we can advocate. And I think we need to really look at our organization's relationships with financial institutions. Everybody wants our business. Phyllis, I see you nodding, right? I mean, come on, they're calling us all the time. Can I do this for you? Can I have a piece of this? Can I have it? But analyze what they're asking for. They're asking for the top 25% of what you do. If you want that, you need to help me on that. You need to do it at the same time. I'm not going to give you a construction loan on my real estate project if you're not going to give me investment capital that I can invest in real people. I'll move on to somebody else. Come on. We need to, our businesses are hard. I know our businesses are hard. And you want to go with trusted and true relationships. You always want to go with the best deal. But I think it's time for us, if we want to acquire capital to address this problem, we need to start putting pressure on the people we do business with.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to thank our panelists. Terrific suggestions, feedback, and we're going to commit to continue working as a group to implement some of your strategies. Before I give you instructions on next steps, Alex has an announcement to make.
Hi, everyone. So when you walked in, checked in, you all got a number. Some people came in kind of at the end or maybe missed us, so we just want to make sure that anybody who does not have a number knows where they need to go next. So if you could raise your hand if you did not receive a number. Edward, okay. Only one? Oh, great. Okay, perfect. So then I will get with you, Edward, and we'll put you in an appropriate room. And so just so everybody knows, room 1 will be in the back of this larger room. Room 2 will be on this side of the room. And then room 3. And then room 4 and room 5 is kind of awkwardly down on that end. So whatever your number is, that's where you need to go next.
Thank you, Alex. So for our folks that are joining today's presentation via live stream, this concludes the feed, but we do want your feedback. So what will happen is you'll receive a survey, a link to that survey if you're tapping in via live stream. Please do take the time to submit your comments, give us your suggestions. We're very interested in hearing from you and connecting with you down the road. Thank you all for joining. So let's do another breakouts now.